My name is Daniel Foster, and at 28, I never expected a casual lunch meeting to become the moment my entire family finally saw who I really was. Sitting across from my older brother Jake at Romano's Italian bistro, watching his confident smirk fade into horror, I realized that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply being yourself when no one expects it. But before I tell you about that lunch and what happened when Jake's boss Richard Sterling walked through those restaurant doors, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like button if you've ever been the underestimated sibling who quietly built an empire while everyone was looking the other way. Growing up as the younger foster brother meant living in Jake's carefully crafted shadow. He was everything our parents valued: aggressive, confident, socially connected, and relentlessly ambitious. While I preferred books to parties and strategy games to sports, Jake dominated every room he entered with his loud personality and natural charisma. Our childhood home in Westchester County reflected this dynamic perfectly. Jake's achievements covered the refrigerator and hallway walls: varsity football captain, homecoming king, student body president. My academic awards and chess tournament victories were acknowledged with polite nods before conversation inevitably returned to Jake's latest social conquest or athletic achievement. Our father, Robert Foster, owned a successful insurance brokerage and prized the kind of assertive networking skills that came naturally to Jake. Our mother, Patricia, taught high school and appreciated Jake's leadership qualities and easy charm with teachers and administrators. Jake's going places, Dad would tell his golf buddies. Natural-born leader, just like his old man. When attention turned to me, the comments were more cautious. Daniel's the quiet one. Smart enough but lacks Jake's drive. The pattern established early and persisted through high school. Jake excelled at making connections, building relationships, and positioning himself at the center of every important social circle. He dated the popular girls, befriended the influential families, and graduated with a network that immediately opened doors in the business world. I took a different approach. While Jake was attending parties and building his social media presence, I spent hours reading business books, studying market trends, and teaching myself programming languages. I found more satisfaction in understanding how systems worked than in working the system itself. The divergence became more pronounced during college. Jake attended our father's alma mater, joining the same fraternity and studying business administration with a focus on sales and marketing. His college experience was exactly what our parents expected: networking events, internships at prestigious firms, and a social life that expanded his professional connections. I chose a smaller school with a strong computer science program. While Jake's Instagram showed fraternity parties and spring break trips, I was building websites for local businesses and learning about emerging technologies. My social media presence was minimal, but my bank account was growing from freelance programming projects. The family dinners during those years followed a predictable script. Jake would regale everyone with stories of his internships, job interviews, and networking successes. Our parents hung on every word, asking detailed questions and offering advice based on their own professional experiences. When conversation turned to me, I offered brief updates about my coursework and avoided mentioning the small software consulting business I'd started. My achievements felt incompatible with their definition of success, so I learned to keep them private. The dynamic reached its peak during Jake's senior year. He landed a coveted position at Sterling and Associates, a prestigious consulting firm in Manhattan. The starting salary was impressive, the company's reputation was stellar, and our parents treated his job offer like a family victory. "That's my boy," Dad announced at the celebration dinner. "Corner office by 30, I guarantee it." Jake embraced the role perfectly. He moved to a trendy apartment in Brooklyn, bought expensive suits, and cultivated the image of a rising young executive. His social media presence became a carefully curated showcase of professional success: networking events, client dinners, company retreats. Meanwhile, I graduated quietly with a computer science degree and continued building my consulting business. I specialized in developing custom software solutions for mid-sized companies, work that was lucrative but largely invisible to my family. While Jake was posting photos from corporate retreats, I was signing contracts with clients who valued results over relationships. The family gatherings during this period were particularly challenging. Jake would arrive in his BMW, wearing designer clothes and carrying the latest iPhone. He'd spend dinner describing his projects, his clients, and his rapid advancement within Sterling and Associates. "Just made senior consultant," he announced at Thanksgiving during his second year. youngest person in company history to reach that level. Our parents beamed with pride while I offered congratulations and changed the subject. I didn't mention that my business had just signed a six-figure contract with a manufacturing company, or that I was considering expanding to serve enterprise clients. The contrast in our lifestyles became a source of family concern. While Jake lived visibly well, expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, designer everything, I maintained a modest apartment and drove a reliable used car. To our parents, this confirmed their assessment of our relative success levels. "Daniel needs to network more," Mom would say during their private conversations, which I occasionally overheard. Jake could introduce him to people, help him find better opportunities. The assumption that I needed Jake's help stung, but I preferred building something substantial to building something impressive. My client base was growing through referrals and quality work, not through networking events and social connections. By Jake's third year at Sterling & Associates, the family dynamic had solidified into a predictable pattern. He was the success story, the golden child whose career validated our parents' values and expectations. I was the underachiever, the younger brother who'd failed to capitalize on his potential. This narrative reached its crescendo at our parents' anniversary dinner last spring. The entire extended family gathered at Romano's Italian Bistro, the same restaurant where everything would change 6 months later. Jake arrived late as always, making a grand entrance that drew attention from nearby tables. He'd just returned from a company retreat in the Bahamas and couldn't stop talking about his projects, his bonus structure, and his trajectory toward partnership track. Our aunts and uncles listened with admiration while our cousins asked questions about his glamorous corporate life. When attention briefly turned to me, I mentioned that business was going well and left it at that. But Jake, emboldened by wine and the admiring audience, decided to elaborate on our different paths. "Dan's still doing his computer thing," he said with condescending affection. "Small stuff, local clients. Nothing wrong with staying small, right, Dan?" The comment drew uncomfortable chuckles from relatives who weren't sure how to respond. I smiled and nodded, accustomed to his casual dismissals of my work. But Jake wasn't finished. Perhaps sensing an opportunity to reinforce his position as the family's success story, he leaned back in his chair and delivered the line that would make our next encounter so particularly satisfying. "You'll never be successful like me, Dan," he said with the confidence of someone who'd never been seriously challenged. "Some people are just built for bigger things." The table fell silent. Even our parents looked uncomfortable with the bluntness of his statement. But Jake seemed pleased with himself, having clearly established the hierarchy in front of our entire extended family. I took a sip of water and smiled. "You might be right, Jake." What I didn't tell him, what I hadn't told anyone, was that earlier that week I'd signed the largest contract in my company's history. Sterling & Associates, Jake's prestigious employer, had hired my firm to overhaul their entire client management system. The project was worth $800,000 and would take 8 months to complete. The irony was delicious, but I kept it to myself. Jake had no idea that his own company had become my biggest client, or that his boss Richard Sterling had personally approved my proposal after a competitive bidding process. The months following that anniversary dinner were productive but quiet. I focused on delivering exceptional work for Sterling & Associates while maintaining my other client relationships. The project was complex, integrating multiple software systems, streamlining workflows, and creating custom applications that would save the company hundreds of thousands annually. Richard Sterling proved to be an ideal client. Unlike Jake, who valued appearance over substance, Richard was impressed by results and efficiency. Our weekly progress meetings were focused and productive, with Richard frequently expressing appreciation for my team's professionalism and expertise. "This is exactly what we needed," Richard told me during one of our sessions. "Your approach is saving us months of development time and delivering capabilities we didn't even know were possible." What made the situation particularly interesting was that Jake remained completely unaware of my involvement with his company. Sterling & Associates was large enough that individual consultants didn't interact with every department, and my project was handled through the IT and operations divisions rather than Jake's client services team. Jake continued his pattern of family updates, regaling everyone with stories of his client successes and professional advancement. He'd been promoted again and was now managing a small team, a development that our parents celebrated as evidence of his leadership potential. Meanwhile, I was quietly revolutionizing the technology infrastructure that enabled his entire department to function effectively. The client management system I was building would directly impact his daily work, but he had no idea who was creating it. The project progressed smoothly through the summer and early fall. My team delivered each milestone on schedule and within budget, earning increasingly positive feedback from Sterling and Associates' executive team. Richard began discussing additional projects and hinting at a long-term partnership that could expand my business significantly. But I still hadn't told my family about the Sterling and Associates contract. The combination of Jake's arrogance and my parents' obvious favoritism made me reluctant to share achievements that might be dismissed or minimized. I'd learned to let my work speak for itself rather than seeking external validation. The turning point came in November when Richard Sterling suggested we meet for lunch to discuss the next phase of our partnership. He proposed Romano's Italian Bistro, the same restaurant where Jake had declared I'd never be successful like him. "It's convenient to our office," Richard explained, "and they have a private dining room where we can discuss confidential details." I agreed, amused by the coincidence but not expecting any particular drama. It was simply a business lunch with an important client, the kind of meeting that had become routine as my company grew. What I didn't anticipate was that Jake would choose the same restaurant for his own business lunch that day. The meeting with Richard proceeded exactly as planned. We discussed the final phase of the current project, outlined specifications for 2 additional contracts, and negotiated terms for a preferred vendor agreement that would make Sterling and Associates my anchor client for the foreseeable future. "Your work has exceeded every expectation," Richard said as we reviewed the contracts. "The efficiency gains alone will save us over $300,000 annually, and that's before we calculate the improved client satisfaction metrics." We were finalizing details when I noticed a familiar figure at a table across the dining room. Jake sat with his back to us, gesticulating enthusiastically while talking to what appeared to be a potential client. His body language radiated the confident energy I'd observed since childhood, leaning forward, making expansive gestures dominating the conversation. I mentioned to Richard that my brother worked for his company, pointing discreetly toward Jake's table. "Jake Foster?" Richard asked, following my gaze. "Solid performer, good with clients. He's in our business development division." "He's mentioned you," I said carefully. "Speaks very highly of the company culture and leadership." Richard smiled. "We're proud of our team. Jake's contributed to some significant client wins this year." As we finished our business discussion and prepared to leave, Richard suggested introducing himself to Jake. "Always good to connect with family members," he explained. "Plus, I'd like to thank him personally for his recent work on the Morrison account." I agreed, curious to see Jake's reaction but not expecting the dramatic scene that was about to unfold. We approached Jake's table just as he was launching into what sounded like a familiar story about his rapid advancement within the company. His lunch companion, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, listened with the polite attention of someone evaluating a potential business partner. "Jake," Richard said warmly, interrupting the conversation. "Good to see you outside the office." Jake looked up, startled to see his boss in the restaurant. His confident expression shifted to professional deference as he quickly stood to shake Richard's hand. "Mr. Sterling," Jake said, his voice notably more subdued than it had been moments earlier. "What a pleasant surprise." "I'd like you to meet someone," Richard continued, gesturing toward me. "This is Daniel Foster, the software consultant I've been telling everyone about. He's the genius behind our new client management system." Jake's eyes widened as he processed the introduction. "Daniel Foster?" he repeated, looking between Richard and me with growing confusion. "Dan's my brother," I said simply, extending my hand with a professional smile. The color drained from Jake's face as the implications hit him. His lunch companion watched with interest, clearly sensing the tension but unaware of its source. "Your brother?" Richard asked, delighted by the coincidence. "Jake, you never mentioned your brother was running the consulting firm that's been transforming our operations." Jake opened his mouth but no words came out. I could see him frantically trying to reconcile his image of his unsuccessful younger brother with Richard's description of a valued business partner. "Daniel's company has been absolutely exceptional," Richard continued, either unaware of Jake's distress or choosing to ignore it. "Professional, innovative, ahead of schedule on every deliverable. We're signing an expanded contract today that will make them our primary technology partner. Jake's lunch companion looked impressed. Software consulting, he said, extending his hand to me. That's a growing field. You must be doing very well for yourself. Business has been good, I replied modestly, shaking his hand while watching Jake struggle to process what was happening. Richard checked his watch. I should get back to the office, but Jake, make sure you give your brother the recognition he deserves. His work is going to revolutionize how we serve our clients. As Richard prepared to leave, he turned back to me. Daniel, I'll have the contracts reviewed by legal and back to you by Friday. Looking forward to our continued partnership. He shook my hand again, nodded to Jake's lunch companion, and headed toward the exit, leaving Jake and me standing beside the table in awkward silence. Jake's companion looked between us with growing curiosity. So you're the software consultant Sterling was talking about, he said to me. Impressive client to land. Sterling and Associates has been great to work with, I replied. Professional organization, clear communication, realistic timelines. Jake finally found his voice. Dan, I had no idea you were working with my company. It came up through normal channels, I said calmly. Competitive bidding process, proposal presentations, the usual client acquisition process. Jake's lunch companion excused himself to take a phone call, leaving us alone at the table. Jake sat down heavily, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been respect. $800,000, Jake said quietly. Richard mentioned the contract value in our team meeting last week. I had no idea that was you. I sat down across from him, the same position we'd occupied during countless family dinners where he dominated the conversation with stories of his professional success. You never asked about my work, I pointed out. You assumed small stuff, local clients, remember? Jake winced at having his own words reflected back to him. But how? When did you? How long have you been building the business? About 6 years. Sterling and Associates isn't my only client, Jake. They're just the most recent. He leaned back in his chair, processing information that clearly challenged everything he thought he knew about our relative success levels. 6 years, he repeated. And our parents never. I don't talk about work at family dinners, I said. You seem to have that covered. The truth of that statement hung between us. 4 years, Jake had monopolized conversations about professional achievement, never leaving space for others to share their own accomplishments. My success had developed quietly without fanfare or family recognition, but it had developed nonetheless. Jake's lunch companion returned, apologizing for the interruption and clearly eager to continue their business discussion. But Jake seemed distracted, glancing at me repeatedly while trying to maintain his professional demeanor. I should let you get back to your meeting, I said, standing to leave. Dan, wait, Jake called after me. Can we talk later? Really talk. I nodded. Call me tonight. We should catch up. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Jake's companion ask, Everything all right? You seem a bit shaken. Jake's response was muffled, but I caught the words, my brother, and didn't realize. The drive back to my office gave me time to process what had just happened. 4 years, I'd built my business and my reputation without family recognition or support. I'd chosen substance over visibility, results over relationships, competence over charisma. Jake's shock at discovering my success revealed how completely he'd dismissed my potential. In his mind, I was still the quiet younger brother who lacked his drive and ambition. The possibility that I might have found a different path to success, one that didn't require his particular combination of networking and self-promotion, had never occurred to him. That evening, Jake called as promised. The conversation was unlike any we'd ever had. I owe you an apology, he began without preamble. Actually, I owe you several apologies. You don't need to, I started, but he interrupted. Yes, I do. What I said at Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner, about you never being successful like me. That was arrogant and wrong, and I'm sorry. I appreciated the directness of his apology, but I was more interested in understanding his perspective. Why did you assume I wasn't doing well? I asked. You never asked about my work, my clients, my income. Jake was quiet for a moment. Because you don't live like you're successful, he said finally. No expensive car, no designer clothes, No flashy apartment. I thought success looked like what I was doing. It was an honest answer, and it revealed something important about how our family had defined and measured achievement. I invest differently, I explained. Business growth, technology, long-term stability rather than short-term appearance. Richard called you a genius, Jake said quietly. In the team meeting when he was talking about the new system. He said we were lucky to find someone with your capabilities. The conversation continued for over an hour. Jake asked detailed questions about my business model, my client base, and my growth trajectory. For the first time, he seemed genuinely interested in understanding my path rather than dismissing it. I've been thinking, he said near the end of our call. Maybe we could collaborate on something. My client relationships, your technical expertise. It was a generous offer, and I appreciated the implicit recognition of my value. But I'd spent years building something independent. Something that succeeded on its own merits rather than through family connections. Let me think about it, I said. But Jake? Thanks for asking. That means a lot. The family dynamics began shifting immediately. Jake called our parents that night and told them about our encounter at the restaurant. According to him, they were shocked to learn about my Sterling and Associates contract and embarrassed that they'd been unaware of my professional success. Mom called the next morning, her voice filled with a combination of pride and bewilderment. Danny, why didn't you tell us about your business? She asked. Jake says you're making more money than he is. I tried to tell you, Mom. But the conversation always focused on Jake's achievements. I learned to keep my work private. The hurt in her voice was evident. We would have been proud of you. We are proud of you. I know you love me, I said gently. But you've always been more comfortable celebrating Jake's kind of success. Visible, social, easy to understand. My path was different. Over the following weeks, the family's understanding of my career evolved rapidly. Jake shared details about the Sterling and Associates project with our parents, explaining how my work was improving efficiency across multiple departments. Our father, with his business background, began asking sophisticated questions about my company's structure and growth plans. The Thanksgiving dinner that year was markedly different from previous gatherings. Instead of Jake dominating conversations about his professional life, our extended family asked questions about both of our careers. Jake graciously directed attention to my recent successes, describing the Sterling and Associates project in terms that clearly impressed our relatives. Dan's the technical genius in the family, Jake told our uncle. I'm good with people, but he's building systems that change how entire companies operate. It was the first time Jake had publicly acknowledged my expertise, and it marked a fundamental shift in how our family understood our respective contributions. The business relationship with Sterling and Associates continued to grow throughout the winter. Richard introduced me to contacts at other consulting firms, leading to 3 additional major contracts. By spring, I'd hired 4 full-time employees and moved to a larger office space. Jake and I began meeting monthly for lunch. Initially to discuss potential collaboration opportunities, but eventually just to stay connected as brothers rather than competitors. He shared insights about client relationship management while I helped him understand how technology could enhance his business development efforts. I wish I'd known about your success earlier, he said during one of our lunches. Not just because of the business opportunities, but because I missed years of actually knowing my brother. Our conversations revealed how completely we'd misunderstood each other. Jake had interpreted my quietness as lack of ambition, while I'd seen his networking as superficial self-promotion. In reality, we'd both been building successful careers using our different strengths and approaches. The most significant change was in our parents' perspective. They began recognizing that success could take multiple forms, and that their previous focus on Jake's achievements had inadvertently diminished their appreciation for my accomplishments. We're proud of both our sons, Dad told his golf buddies, a comment that reached me through our small town's reliable gossip network. Different approaches, but both successful in their own ways. By summer, my relationship with Sterling and Associates had evolved into a comprehensive technology partnership. Richard recommended my services to other firms in his network, leading to opportunities that would double my company's revenue within 12 months. Jake's career continued thriving as well, but our family gatherings no longer felt like competitions for recognition and approval. We'd learned to celebrate each other's achievements rather than using them to establish hierarchy or validate different definitions of success. The most profound change, though, was in my own confidence. For years, I'd allowed others' expectations to make me doubt the value of my path. Jake's shock at discovering my success forced me to recognize how much I'd internalized his dismissive attitude toward my work. I'd been successful all along, I just hadn't demanded recognition for it. 6 months after that pivotal lunch at Romano's, I was invited to speak at a technology conference about sustainable business growth. The audience included executives from major corporations, and several approached me afterward about potential consulting projects. Among the attendees was Jake, who'd taken a personal day to hear my presentation. Watching him in the audience, proud, supportive, genuinely interested in my expertise, I realized how much our relationship had evolved. After the conference, we drove back to Westchester together for our parents' Sunday dinner. The family dynamics that had once felt oppressive now felt supportive. Our parents asked detailed questions about my presentation and Jake's latest client successes, treating both of us as accomplished professionals whose different paths were equally valuable. "Remember when you said I'd never be successful like you?" I asked Jake as we pulled into our parents' driveway. He grimaced. "One of my less proud moments." "You were right, though," I said with a smile. "I'm not successful like you. I'm successful like me." Jake laughed, understanding the distinction. "Much better approach, actually. My way requires too much networking." That evening, as our extended family gathered around the dinner table, the conversation flowed naturally between different topics and achievements. Jake described his latest client acquisition while I shared updates about my company's expansion plans. Our parents listened to both with equal interest and pride. The teenager who'd once felt invisible had become an entrepreneur whose work impacted thousands of employees across multiple companies. The quiet brother who'd been dismissed as lacking ambition had built something substantial and lasting. But more importantly, I'd learned that external validation, even from family, was less important than internal conviction. I'd been building success all along. The only thing that changed was others' recognition of it. If you're reading this as the overlooked sibling, the quiet achiever, the one whose path doesn't match others' expectations, remember that success comes in many forms. Build something meaningful, serve others authentically, and trust that the right people will eventually see your value. Sometimes the sweetest moment isn't when you prove others wrong, but when you realize you were right about yourself all along. Have you ever been underestimated by family members who later discovered your true achievements? How did you handle the moment when their perception finally caught up with your reality? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this journey from dismissal to recognition resonated with you. Remember, the people who dismiss your potential today might be calling you sir tomorrow.